troubled times, our fifth objective, a new world order, can emerge, a new era, freer from the threat of terror, stronger in the pursuit of justice, and more secure in the quest for peace. An era in which the nations of the world, East and West, North and South, can prosper and live in harmony. 100 generations have searched for this elusive path to peace, while 1,000 wars raged across the span of human endeavor.
The Georgia Guidestones are a granite monument in Elbert County, Georgia in the United States of America which was erected in 1980. A set of 10 guidelines for humanity is inscribed on the structure in 8 modern languages, and a shorter message is inscribed at the top of the structure in 4 and C. Ent language scripts. Moving clockwise around the structure from due north, the languages are English, Spanish, Swahili, Hindi, Hebrew, Arabic, traditional Chinese and Russian. It is believed that the purpose of the stones is to guide humanity after a predicted post-apocalyptic event that will come in the not-so-distant future. The controversial 10 guidelines have been described in many ways, from perfect and utopian to satanic or a mere quirk. The anonymity of the Guidestones authors and their apparent advocacy of population control, eugenics and internationalism have made them a target foe. Our controversy and conspiracy theories. The monument consists of 5 granite slabs, each of which weighs more than 20 tons, that have been placed in a star pattern with one slab in the center. A capstone lies on top of the 5 slabs, which are astronomically aligned. The 10 guidelines maintain humanity under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature. Guide reproduction wisely, improving fitness and diversity. Unite humanity with a living new language. Rule passion, faith, tradition, and all things with tempered reason. Protect people and nations with fair laws and just courts. Let all nations rule internally, resolving external disputes in a world court. Avoid petty laws and useless officials. Balance personal rights with social duties. Prize truth, beauty, love, seeking harmony with the infinite. Be not a cancer on the earth, leave room for nature, leave room for nature. Where it started. In June 1979, a man using the pseudonym Robert C. Christian approached the Elberton Granite Finishing Company on behalf of a small group of loyal Americans, and commissioned the structure. He said they had been planning the Guidestones for 20 years and intended to remain anonymous. The stones were to function as a compass, calendar and clock, and should be capable of withstanding catastrophic events. The astrological specifications were so complex that the construction company had to employ an astronomer from the University of Georgia to assist. The stones indicate the day of the year, equinoxes and solstices among others. Christian was quoted an amount several times higher than he should have been to discourage him from building the structure. He accepted the quote.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know. But I do ask But I do ask every publisher, every editor, and every newsman in the nation to re-examine his own standards and to recognize the nature of our country's peril. In time of war, the government and the press have customarily joined in an effort based largely on self-discipline to prevent unauthorized disclosures to the enemy. In times of clear and present danger, the courts have held that even the privileged rights of the First Amendment must yield to the public's need for national security. Today, no war has been declared, and however fierce the struggle may be, it may never be declared in the traditional fashion. Our way of life is under attack. Those who make themselves our enemy are advancing around the globe. The survival of our friends is in danger, and yet no war has been declared. No borders have been crossed by marching troops. No missiles have been fired. If the press is awaiting a declaration of war before it imposes the self-discipline of combat conditions, then I can only say that no war ever posed a greater threat to our security. If you are awaiting a finding of clear and present danger, then I can only say that the danger has never been more clear, and its presence has never been more imminent. It requires a change in outlook, a change in tactics, a change in missions by the government, by the people, by every businessman or labor leader, and by every newspaper. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. It conducts the Cold War, in short, with a wartime discipline no democracy would ever hope or wish to match. Nevertheless, every democracy recognizes the necessary restraints of national security. And the question remains whether those restraints need to be more strictly observed if we are to oppose this kind of attack as well as outright invasion. For the facts of the matter are that this nation's foes have openly boasted of acquiring through our newspapers information they would otherwise hire agents to acquire through theft, bribery, or espionage. That details of this nation's covert preparations to counter the enemy's covert operations have been available to every newspaper reader, friend and foe alike. That the size, the strength, the location, and the nature of our forces and weapons, and our plans and strategy for their use, have all been pinpointed in the press and other news media to a degree sufficient to satisfy any foreign power, and that in at least one case, the publication of details concerning a secret mechanism whereby satellites were followed required its alteration at the expense of considerable time and money. The newspapers which printed these stories were loyal, patriotic, responsible, and well-meaning. Had we been engaged in open warfare, they undoubtedly would not have published such items. But in the absence of open warfare, they recognized only the tests of journalism and not the tests of national security. And my question tonight is whether additional tests should not now be adopted. That question is for you alone to answer. No public official should answer it for you. No governmental plan should impose its restraints against your will. But I would be failing in my duty to the nation in considering all of the responsibilities that we now bear and all of the means at hand to meet those responsibilities if I did not commend this problem to your attention and urge its thoughtful consideration. On many earlier occasions I have said, and your newspapers have constantly said, that these are times that appeal to every citizen's sense of sacrifice and self-discipline. They call out to every citizen to weigh his rights and comforts against his obligations to the common good. I cannot now believe that those citizens who serve in the newspaper business consider themselves exempt from that appeal. I have no intention of establishing a new Office of War Information to govern the flow of news. I am not suggesting any new forms of censorship or new types of security classifications. I have no easy answer to the dilemma that I have posed and would not seek to impose it if I had one. But I am asking the members of the newspaper profession and the industry in this country to re-examine their own responsibilities, to consider the degree and the nature of the present danger, and to heed the duty of self-restraint which that danger imposes upon us all. Every newspaper now asks itself, with respect to every story, is it news? All I suggest is that you add the question, is it in the interest of national security? And I hope that every group in America, unions and businessmen and public officials at every level, will ask the same question of their endeavors and subject their actions to this same exacting test. And should the press of America consider and recommend the voluntary assumption of specific new steps or machinery, I can assure you that we will cooperate wholeheartedly with those recommendations. Perhaps there will be no recommendations. Perhaps there is no answer to the dilemma faced by a free and open society in a cold and secret war. In times of peace, any discussion of this subject and any action that results are both painful and without precedent. But this is a time of peace and peril which knows no precedent in history. It is the unprecedented nature of this challenge that also gives rise to your second obligation, an obligation which I share, and that is our obligation to inform and alert the American people, to make certain that they possess all the facts that they need and understand them as well, the perils, the prospects, the purposes of our program, and the choices that we face. No president should fear public scrutiny of his program, for from that scrutiny comes understanding, and from that understanding comes support or opposition, and both are necessary. I am not asking your newspapers to support an administration, but I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people. For I have complete confidence in the response and dedication of our citizens whenever they are fully informed. I not only could not stifle controversy among your readers, I welcome it. This administration intends to be candid about its errors. For as a wise man once said, an error doesn't become a mistake until you refuse to correct it. We intend to accept full responsibility for our errors, and we expect you to point them out when we miss them. Without debate, without criticism, no administration and no country can succeed, and no republic can survive. That is why the Athenian lawmaker Solon decreed it a crime for any citizen to shrink from controversy. And that is why our press was protected by the First Amendment, the only business in America specifically protected by the Constitution, not primarily to amuse and entertain, not to emphasize the trivial and the sentimental, not to simply give the public what it wants, but to inform, to arouse, to reflect, to state our dangers and our opportunities, to indicate our crises and our choices, to lead, mold, educate, and sometimes even anger public opinion. This means greater coverage and analysis of international news, for it is no longer far away and foreign, but close at hand and local. It means greater attention to improved understanding of the news, as well as improved transmission. And it means, finally, that government at all levels must meet its obligation to provide you with the fullest possible information outside the narrowest limits of national security, and we intend to do it. It was early in the 17th century that Francis Bacon remarked on three recent inventions already transforming the world: the compass, gunpowder, and the printing press. Now the links between the nations, first forged by the compass, have made us all citizens of the world, the hopes and threats of one becoming the hopes and threats of us all. In that one world's effort to live together, the evolution of gunpowder to its ultimate limit has warned mankind of the terrible consequences of failure. And so it is to the printing press, to the recorder of man's deeds, the keeper of his conscience, the courier of his news, that we look for strength and assistance, confident that with your help, man will be what he was born.
A vital element in keeping the peace is our military establishment. Our arms must be mighty, ready for instant action, so that no potential aggressor may be tempted to risk his own destruction. Our military organization today bears little relation to that known of any of my predecessors in peacetime, or indeed by the fighting men of World War II or Korea. Until the latest of our world conflicts, the United States had no armaments industry. American makers of plowshares could, with time and as required, make swords as well. But we can no longer risk emergency improvisation of national defense. We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. Added to this, 3.5 million men and women are directly engaged in the defense establishment. We annually spend on military security alone more than the net income of all United States corporations. Now, this conjunction of an immense military establishment and a large arms industry is new in the American experience. The total influence, economic, political, even spiritual, is felt in every city, every state house, every office of the federal government. We recognize the imperative need for this development, yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. Our toil, resources, and livelihood are all involved. So is the very structure of our society. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. We should take nothing for granted. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizen can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals, so that security and liberty may prosper together. Akin to and largely responsible for the sweeping changes in our industrial military posture has been the technological revolution during recent decades. In this revolution, research has become central. It also becomes more formalized, complex, and costly. A steadily increasing share is conducted for, by, or at the direction of the federal government. Today, the solitary inventor, tinkering in his shop, has been overshadowed by task forces of scientists in laboratories and testing fields. In the same fashion, the free university, historically the fountainhead of free ideas and scientific discovery, has experienced a revolution in the conduct of research. Partly because of the huge costs involved, a government contract becomes virtually a substitute for intellectual curiosity. For every old blackboard, there are now hundreds of new electronic computers. The prospect of domination of the nation's scholars by federal employment, project allocations, and the power of money is ever present and is gravely to be regarded. Yet in holding scientific research and discovery in respect, as we should, we must also be alert to the equal and opposite danger that public policy could itself become the captive of a scientific, technological elite. It is the task of statesmanship to mold, to balance, and to integrate these and other forces, new and old, within the principles of our democratic system, ever aiming toward the supreme goals of our free society. Another factor in maintaining balance involves the element of time. As we peer into society's future, we, you and I, and our government must avoid the impulse to live only for today, plundering for our own ease and convenience the precious resources of tomorrow. We cannot mortgage the material assets of our grandchildren without risking the loss also of their political and spiritual heritage. We want democracy to survive for all generations to come, not to become the insolvent phantom of tomorrow. During the long lane of the history yet to be written, America knows that this world of ours, ever growing smaller, must avoid becoming a community of dreadful fear and hate, and be instead a proud confederation of mutual trust and respect. Such a confederation must be one of equals. The weakest must come to the conference table with the same confidence as do we, protected as we are by our moral, economic, and military strength. That table, though scarred by many past frustrations, cannot be abandoned for the certainty agony of disarmament of the battlefield. Disarmament with mutual honor and confidence is a continuing imperative. Together we must learn how to compose differences, not with arms, but with intellect and decent purpose. Because this need is so sharp and apparent, I confess that I lay down my official responsibilities in this field with a definite sense of disappointment. As one who has witnessed the horror and the lingering sadness of war, as one who knows that another war could utterly destroy this civilization, which has been so slowly and painfully built over thousands of years, I wish I could say tonight that a lasting peace is in sight. Happily, I can say that war has been avoided. Steady progress toward our ultimate goal has been made, but so much remains to be done. As a private citizen, I shall never cease to do what little I can to help the world advance along that road. So in this, my last good night to you as your president, I thank you for the many opportunities you have given me for public service in war and in peace. I trust in that service, you find some things worthy. As for the rest of it, I know you will find ways to improve performance in the future. You and I, my fellow citizens, need to be strong in our faith that all nations under God will reach the goal of peace with justice. May we be ever unswerving in devotion to principle, confident but humble with power, diligent in pursuit of the nation's great goals. To all the peoples of the world, I once more give expression to America's prayerful and continuing aspiration. We pray that peoples of all faiths, all races, all nations may have their great human needs satisfied, that those now denied opportunity shall come to enjoy it to the full, that all who yearn for freedom may experience its spiritual blessings. Those who have freedom will understand also its heavy responsibility, that all who are insensitive to the needs of others will learn charity, and that the sources, scourges of poverty, disease, and ignorance will be made disappear from the earth. and that in the goodness of time, all peoples will come to live together in a peace guaranteed by the binding force of mutual respect and love. Now, on Friday noon, I am to become a private citizen. I am proud to do so. I look forward to it. Thank you, and good night.
Bohemian Grove is a restricted 2,700-acre, 1,100 hectares, campground located at 20,601 Bohemian Avenue, in Monte Rio, California, United States, belonging to a private San Francisco-based gentlemen's club known as the Bohemian Club. In mid-July each year, Bohemian Grove hosts a more than 2-week encampment of some of the most prominent men in the world. The Bohemian Club's all-male membership and guest list includes artists, particularly musicians, as well as many prominent business leaders, government officials, including US presidents, senior media executives, and people of power. Members may invite guests to the Grove. Guests may be invited to the Grove for either the Spring Jinx in June or the main July encampment. Bohemian Club members can schedule private day use events at the Grove anytime it is not being used for club-wide purposes, and they are allowed at these times to bring spouses, family, and friends, although female and minor guests must be off the property by 9 or 10 p.m. 2100 or 2200 local time. After 40 years of membership, the men earn Old Guard status, giving them reserved seating at the Grove's daily talks, as well as other perquisites. Former U.S. President Herbert Hoover was inducted into the Old Guard on March 19, 1953. He had joined the club exactly 40 years previously. Redwood branches from the Grove were flown to the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York City, where they were used to decorate a banquet room for the celebration. In his acceptance speech, Hoover compared the honor of the Old Guard status to his frequent role as veteran counselor to later presidents. The club motto is "Weaving spiders come not here," which implies that outside concerns and business deals, networking, are to be left outside. When gathered in groups, Bohemians usually adhere to the injunction, although discussion of business often occurs between pairs of members. Important political and business deals have been developed at the Grove. The Grove is particularly famous for a Manhattan project planning meeting that took place there in September 1942, which subsequently led to the atomic bomb. Those attending this meeting included Ernest Lawrence, J. Robert Oppenheimer, the S1 executive committee heads, such as the presidents of Harvard, Yale, and Princeton, along with representatives of Standard Oil and General Electric as well as various military officials. At the time, Oppenheimer was not an S1 member, although Lawrence and Oppenheimer hosted the meeting. Grove members take particular pride in this event and often relate the story to new attendees. However, other behavior at this famous campground have led to numerous claims and even some parody in popular culture. One such documented example was former President Richard Nixon's comments from a May 13, 1971 recording that, "The Bohemian Grove, which I attend from time to time, it is the most faggy goddamn thing you could ever imagine." The tradition of a summer encampment was established 6 years after the Bohemian Club was formed in 1872. Harry Edwards, a stage actor and founding member, announced that he was relocating to New York City to further his career. On June 29, 1878, somewhat fewer than 100 Bohemians gathered in the Redwoods in Marin County near Taylorville, present-day Samuel P. Taylor State Park, for an evening send-off party in Edwards' honor. Freely flowing liquor and some Japanese lanterns put a glow on the festivities, and club members read hired at a late hour to the modest comfort of blankets laid on the dense mat of redwood needles. This festive gathering was repeated the next year without Edwards, and became the club's yearly encampment. By 1882 the members of the club camped together at various locations in both Marin and Sonoma County, including the present-day Muir Woods and a redwood grove that once stood near Duncan's Mills, several miles down the Russian River from the current location. From 1893 Bohemians rented the current location, and in 1899 purchased it from Melvin Cyrus Meeker, who had developed a successful logging operation in the area. Gradually over the next decades, members of the club purchased land surrounding the original location to the perimeter of the basin in WHI. It resides. Writer and journalist William Henry Irwin said of the Grove, "You come upon it suddenly. One step and its glory is over you. There is no perspective, you cannot get far enough away from one of the trees to see it as a whole. There they stand, a world of height above you, the pinnacles hidden by the topmost fringes of branches or lost in the sky. You come upon it suddenly. One step and its glory is over you. There is no perspective, you cannot get far enough away from one of the trees to see it as a whole. There they stand, a world of height above you, the pinnacles hidden by the topmost fringes of branches or lost in the sky." Although no woman has ever been given full membership in the Bohemian Club, the 4 female honorary members were hostess Margaret Bowman, poet Ina Coolbrith, who served as librarian for the club, actress Elizabeth Crocker Bowers, and writer Sarah Jane Lippincott. Since Coolbrith's death in 1928, no other woman has been made a member. These honorary members and other female guests have been allowed into the Bohemian City Club building and as daytime guests of the Grove, but not to the upper floors of the City Club nor as guests to the main summer encampment. At the Grove, annual ladies' jigs were held at the club especially for spouses and invited guests. In 1978, the Bohemian Club was charged with discrimination by the California Department of Fair Employment and Housing over its refusal to hire women employees. In January 1981, an administrative law judge issued a decision supporting the practices of the club, noting that club members at the Grove urinate in the open without even the use of rudimentary toilet facilities, and that the presence of females would alter club members' behavior. However, the judge's decision was overruled by the State Fair Employment and Housing Commission, which on October 17, 1981, ordered the club to begin recruiting and hiring women as employees. In 1984, the Bohemian Club went to the Supreme Court of California over the issue, arguing that the freedom of association was being harmed. The court found against the club and denied a review in 1987, forcing the club to begin hiring female workers during the summer encampment of the Grove in Monte Rio. This ruling became quoted as a legal precedent and was discussed during the 1995-1996 floor debate. The surrounding California Senate Bill SB 2110, a proposed bill concerning whether tax-exempt organizations, including fraternal clubs, should be exempt from the Unruh Civil Rights Act. Logging. Outside the central camp area, which is the site of the old Grove, but within the 2,712 acres hour. Led by the Bohemian Club, logging activities have been underway since 1984. Approximately 11 million board feet of lumber equivalents were removed from the surrounding redwood and Douglas fir forest from 1984 to 2007. In 2007, the Bohemian Club Board filed application for a non-industrial logging permit available to landowners with less than 2,500 acres of timberland, which would allow them to steadily increase their logging in the second growth stands from 800,000 board feet 1,900 cubic meters per year to 1,700,000 board feet 4,000 cubic meters over the course of the 50-year permit. The board had been advised by Tom Bonnickson, a retired forestry professor, that they should conduct group selection logging to reduce the risk of fire burning through the dense second growth stands, damaging the old growth forest the club wants to protect. The Bohemian Club stated that an expansion of logging activities was needed to prevent fires, and that money made from the sale of the lumber would be used to stabilize access roads and to clear fire-promoting species like tan oaks and underbrush. The California Department of Fish and Game instead recommended single-tree logging to preserve the habitats of murrelets and spotted owls in senescent trees. Philip Rundle, University of California, Berkeley professor of biology said that redwoods are not very flammable and this is clearly a logging project, not a project to reduce fire hazard. Reed F. Noss, professor at the University of California, Davis, has written that fires within redwood forests do not need to be prevented, that young redwoods are adapted to regenerate well in the destruction left behind by the fires typical of the Climate. After controversy raised by opponents of the harvesting plan, the club moved to clearly establish the qualification for the permit by offering 163 acres to the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation in Missoula, Montana for a conservation easement. A further 56.75 acres were written off as not being available for commercial logging, bringing the total to 2,316 acres and thereby qualifying for the permit. Opponents and their lawyers interpret the relevant law as counting all timberland and not just that actually subject to the logging permit. They state that if the total of timberland is counted, 2,535.75 acres are owned by the club, so the permit should not be granted. On March 10, 2011, Judge Rene A. Puto rejected the Non-Industrial Timber Management Plan (NTMP) that the California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection had APPR. Ovid. The suit, brought by the Sierra Club and the Bohemian Redwood Rescue Club, sought to have the NTMP annulled. The ruling calls on the Bohemian Club to draft a new NTMP that offers alternatives to its proposed rate of logging. At present, the Bohemian Club is not allowed to log any of its property. The club's patron saint is John of Nepomuk, who legend says suffered death at the hands of a Bohemian monarch rather than disclose the confessional secrets of the Queen. A large wood carving of St. John in cleric robes with his index finger over his lips stands at the shore of the lake in the grove, symbolizing the secrecy kept by the Grove's attendees throughout its long history. Since the founding of the club, the Bohemian Grove's mascot has been an owl, symbolizing wisdom. A 30-foot hollow owl statue made of concrete over steel supports stands at the head of the lake in the grove. This statue was designed by sculptor and two-time club president Haig Patigian. It was constructed in the late 1920s. Since 1929, the owl shrine has served as the backdrop of the yearly cremation of care ceremony. The cremation of care ceremony is a theatrical production in which some of the club's members participate as actors. It was first conducted in 1881. The production was devised by James F. Bowman with George D. Bromley playing the High Priest. It was originally set up within the plot of the serious High Jinks dramatic performance on the first weekend of the summer encampment, after which the spirit of Care, slain by the Jinks hero, was solemnly cremated. The ceremony served as a catharsis for pent-up high spirits, and to present symbolically the salvation of the trees by the club. The cremation of Care was separated from the other Grove plays in 1913 and moved to the first night to become an exorcising of the demon to ensure the success of the ensuing 2 weeks. The Grove play was moved to the last weekend of the encampment. The ceremony takes place in front of the owl shrine. The moss and lichen-covered statue simulates a natural rock formation, yet holds electrical and audio equipment within it. For many years, a recording of the voice of club member Walter Cronkite was used as the voice of the owl during the ceremony. Music and pyrotechnics accompany the ritual for dramatic effect. The cremation of care ceremony is a theatrical production in which some of the club's members participate as actors. It was first conducted in 1881. The production was devised by James F. Bowman with George D. Bromley playing the High Priest. It was originally set up within the plot of the serious High Jinks dramatic performance on the first weekend of the summer encampment, after which the spirit of C.A. Reed, slain by the Jinks hero, was solemnly cremated. The ceremony served as a catharsis for pent-up high spirits, and to present symbolically the salvation of the trees by the club. The cremation of Care was separated from the other Grove plays in 1913 and moved to the first night to become an exorcising of the demon to ensure the success of the ensuing 2 weeks. The Grove play was moved to the last weekend of the encampment. The ceremony takes place in front of the owl shrine. The moss and lichen-covered statue simulates a natural rock formation, yet holds electrical and audio equipment. And within it, for many years, a recording of the voice of club member Walter Cronkite was used as the voice of the owl during the ceremony. Music and pyrotechnics accompany the ritual for dramatic effect. Each year, a Grove play is performed for one night during the final weekend of the summer encampment. The play is a large-scale musical theatrical production, written and composed by club members, involving some 300 people, including chorus, cast, stage crew and orchestra. The first Grove play was performed in 1902. During the war years 1943-1945 the stage was dark. In 1975, an observer estimated that the Grove play cost between $20,000 and $30,000, an amount that would be as high as $140,000 in today's dollars. Skull and Bones, secret society of senior, fourth-year undergraduate students at Yale University, New Haven, Connecticut, that was founded in 1832. Male society members are called bonesmen, and many have ascended after graduation to positions of prominence in business or government. Three of them, William Howard Taft, George H.W. Bush, and George W. Bush, became U.S. presidents. Skull and Bones was formed in 1832 by William Huntington Russell and Alphonso Taft. According to some accounts, the society was formed after a dispute over elections to Phi Beta Kappa. Other sources conjecture that Russell modeled the society after European groups he encountered while studying in Germany. The society's original name was the Eulogian Club. It was incorporated in 1856 as the Russell Trust Association. The emblem of the society is a skull and crossbones with the number 322 beneath it. The number is generally taken to refer to the year 322 BCE of the death of the Greek orator Demosthenes, a turning point in the transformation of ancient Athens from democracy to plutocracy. The society's clubhouse is a monumental brownstone building in New Haven called the Tomb. Originally built in 1856, the tomb was doubled in size in 1903 and has since been further enlarged. Skull and Bones is the oldest of several secret societies on the Yale campus. Like most of the others, it chooses 15 new members every spring at a ceremony called Tap Day or Tap Night. Juniors are notified of the selection by a society member who ritually claps them on the shoulder. The society has always kept its affairs secret, but for many years it publicized its membership roster. Some new members are high-achieving students, while others are descendants of socially prominent families. Even though Yale University has admitted women since 1969, females were not granted membership into Skull and Bones until 1992. A persistent rumor has it that the stolen skull of the Apache leader Geronimo is among the relics that Skull and Bones keeps in its tomb. In 2009, Geronimo's descendants sued unsuccessfully to get the skull in question turned over to them. The Illuminati, plural of Latin Illuminatis, enlightened, is a name given to several groups, both real and fictitious. Historically, the name usually refers to the Bavarian Illuminati, an Enlightenment-era secret society founded on the 1st of May 1776. The society's goals were to oppose superstition, obscurantism, religious influence over public life, and abuses of state power. The order of the day, they wrote in their general statutes, is to put an end to the machinations of the purveyors of injustice, to control them without dominating them. The Illuminati, along with Freemasonry and other secret societies, were outlawed through edict by the Bavarian ruler Charles Theodore with the encouragement of the Catholic Church, in 1784, 1785, 1787, and 1790. In the following several years, the group was vilified by conservative and religious critics who claimed that they continued underground and were responsible for the French Revolution. Many influential intellectuals and progressive politicians counted themselves as members, including Ferdinand B. Brunswick and the diplomat Xavier von Zwack, who was the order's second-in-command. It attracted men such as Johann Wolfgang von Goethe and Johann Gottfried Herder and the reigning dukes of Gotha and Weimar. 5. In subsequent use, Illuminati has referred to various organizations which have claimed or have been claimed to be connected to the original Bavarian Illuminati or similar secret societies, though these links have been unsubstantiated. These organizations have often been alleged to conspire to control world affairs by masterminding events and planting agents in government and corporations in order to gain political power and influence and to establish a new world order. Central to some of the more widely known and elaborate conspiracy theories, the Illuminati have been depicted as lurking in the shadows and pulling the strings and levers of power in dozens of novels, films, television shows, comics, video games, and music videos. Adam Weishaupt became professor of canon law and practical philosophy at the University of Ingolstadt in 1773. He was the only non-clerical professor at an institution run by Jesuits, whose order Pope Clement XIV had dissolved in 1773. The Jesuits of Ingolstadt, however, still had control and some power at the university, which they continued to regard as their own. They made constant attempts to frustrate and discredit non-clerical staff, especially when course material contained anything they regarded as liberal or Protestant. Weishaupt became deeply anti-clerical, resolving to spread the ideals of the Enlightenment through some sort of secret society of like-minded individuals. Finding Freemasonry expensive, and not open to his ideas, he founded his own society, which was to have a system of ranks or grades based on Thos. In Freemasonry, but with his own agenda. His original name for the new order was Bund der Perfektibilisten, or Covenant of Perfectibility, Perfectibilists. He later changed it because it sounded too strange. On the 1st of May 1776, Weishaupt and 4 students formed the Perfectibilists, taking the Owl of Minerva as the symbol. The members were to use aliases within the society. Weishaupt became Spartacus. Law students Massenhausen, Bauhof, Mertz and Suter became respectively Ajax, Agathon, Tiberius and Erasmus. Roterodamus. Weishaupt later expelled Suter for indolence. In April 1778 the order became the Illuminatenorden, or Order of Illuminati, after Weishaupt had seriously contemplated the name B Order. Massenhausen proved initially the most active in expanding the society. Significantly, while studying in Munich shortly after the formation of the order, he recruited Xavier von Zwack, a former pupil of Weishaupt, at the beginning of a significant administrative career. At the time, he was in charge of the Bavarian National Lottery. Massenhausen's enthusiasm soon became a liability in the eyes of Weishaupt, often resulting in attempts to recruit unsuitable candidates. Later, his erratic love life made him neglectful, and as Weishaupt passed control of the Munich group to Zwack, it became clear that Massenhausen had misappropriated subscriptions and intercepted correspondence between Weishaupt and Zwack. In 1778, Massenhausen graduated and took a post outside Bavaria, taking no further interest in the order. At this time, the order had a nominal membership of 12. With the departure of Massenhausen, Zwack immediately applied himself to recruiting more mature and important recruits. Most prized by Weishaupt was Hertel, a childhood friend and a canon of the Munich Frauenkirche. By the end of summer 1778 the order had 27 members, still counting Massenhausen, in 5 commands: Munich, Athens, Ingolstadt, Eleusis, Ravensburg, Sparta, Friesingen, Thebes, and Eichstätt Erzurum. During this early period, the order had 3 grades of novice, Minerval, and illuminated Minerval, of which only the Minerval grade involved a complicated ceremony. In this the candidate was given secret signs and a password. A system of mutual espionage kept Weishaupt informed of the activities and character of all his members, his favorites becoming members of the ruling council, or Areopagus. Some novices were permitted to recruit, becoming insinuants. Christians of good character were actively sought, with Jews and pagans specifically excluded, along with women, monks, and members of other secret societies. Favored candidates were rich, docile, willing to learn, and aged 18 to 30. Transition. Having, with difficulty, dissuaded some of his members from joining the Freemasons, Weishaupt decided to join the older order to acquire material to expand his own ritual. He was admitted to Lodge Prudence, of the rite of strict observance, early in February 1777. His progress through the 3 degrees of Blue Lodge Masonry taught him nothing of the higher degrees he sought to exploit, but in the following year a priest called Abbé Merati informed Zwack that these inner secrets rested on knowledge of the older religion and the primitive church. Zwack persuaded Weishaupt that their own order should enter into friendly relations with Freemasonry, and obtain the dispensation to set up their own lodge. At this stage, December 1778, the addition of the first 3 degrees of Freemasonry was seen as a secondary project. With little difficulty, a warrant was obtained from the Grand Lodge of Prussia called the Royal York for friendship, and the new lodge was called Theodore of the Good Counsel, with the intention of flattering Charles Theodore, Elector of Bavaria. It was founded in Munich on the 21st of March 1779, and quickly packed with Illuminati. The first master, a man called Radl, was persuaded to return home to Baden, and by July Weishaupt's order ran the lodge. The next step involved independence from the Grand Lodge. By establishing Masonic relations with the Union Lodge in Frankfurt, affiliated to the Premier Grand Lodge of England, Lodge Theodore became independently recognized, and able to declare its independence. As a new mother lodge, it could now spawn lodges of its own. The recruiting drive amongst the Frankfurt Masons also obtained the allegiance of Adolf Freiherr Nigg. Nigg was recruited late in 1780 at a convention of the rite of strict observance by Costanzo Marchese di Costanzo, an infantry captain in the Bavarian army and a fellow Freemason. Nigg, still in his 20s, had already reached the highest initiatory grades of his order, and had arrived with his own grand plans for its reform. Disappointed that his scheme found no support, Nigg was immediately intrigued when Costanzo informed him that the order that he sought to create already existed. Nigg and 3 of his friends expressed a strong interest in learning more of this order, and Costanzo showed them material relating to the Minerval grade. The teaching material for the grade was liberal literature, which was banned in Bavaria, but common knowledge in the Protestant German states. Nigg's 3 companions became disillusioned and had no more to do with Costanzo, but Nigg's persistence was rewarded in November 1780 by a letter from Weishaupt. Nigg's connections, both within and outside of Freemasonry, made him an ideal recruit. Nigg, for his own part, was flattered by the attention, and drawn towards the order's stated aims of education and the protection of mankind from despotism. Weishaupt managed to acknowledge, and pledge to support, Nigg's interest in alchemy and the higher sciences. Nigg replied to Weishaupt outlining his plans for the reform of Freemasonry as the strict observance began to question its own origins. Weishaupt set Nigg the task of recruiting before he could be admitted to the higher grades of the order. Nigg accepted, on the condition that he be allowed to choose his own recruiting grounds. Many other Masons found Nigg's description of the new Masonic order attractive, and were enrolled in the Minerval grade of the Illuminati. Nigg appeared at this time to believe in the most serene superiors which Weishaupt claimed to serve. His inability to articulate anything about the higher degrees of the order became increasingly embarrassing, but in delaying any help Weishaupt gave him an extra task. Provided with material by Weishaupt, Nigg now produced pamphlets outlining the activities of the outlawed Jesuits, purporting to show how they continued to thrive and recruit, especially in Bavaria. Meanwhile, Nigg's inability to give his recruits any satisfactory response to questions regarding the higher grades was making his position untenable, and he wrote to Weishaupt to this effect. In January 1781, faced with the prospect of losing Nigg and his Masonic recruits, Weishaupt finally confessed that his superiors and the supposed antiquity of the order were fictions, and the higher degrees had yet to be written. If Nigg had expected to learn the promised deep secrets of Freemasonry in the higher degrees of the Illuminati, he was surprisingly calm about Weishaupt's revelation. Weishaupt promised Nigg a free hand in the creation of the higher degrees, and also promised to send him his own notes. For his own part, Nigg welcomed the opportunity to use the order as a vehicle for his own ideas. His new approach would, he claimed, make the Illuminati more attractive to prospective members in the Protestant kingdoms of Germany. In November 1781, the Areopagus advanced Nigg 50 florins to travel to Bavaria, which he did via Swabia and Franconia, meeting and enjoying the hospitality of other Illuminati on his journey. Internal problems. The order had now developed profound internal divisions. The Eichstarate Command had formed an autonomous province in July 1780, and a rift was growing between Weishaupt and the Areopagus, who found him stubborn, dictatorial, and inconsistent. Nigg fitted readily into the role of peacemaker. In discussions with the Areopagus and Weishaupt, Nig identified two areas which were problematic. Weishaupt's emphasis on the recruitment of university students meant that senior positions in the order often had to be filled by young men with lit.gle practical experience. Secondly, the anti-Jesuit ethos of the order at its inception had become a general anti-religious sentiment, which Nig knew would be a problem in recruiting the senior Freemasons that the order now sought to attract. Nig felt keenly the stifling grip of conservative Catholicism in Bavaria, and understood the anti-religious feelings that this produced in the liberal Illuminati, but he also saw the negative impression these same feelings would engender in Protestant states, inhibiting the spread of the order in Greater Germany. Both the Areopagus and Weishaupt felt powerless to do anything less than give Nig a free hand. He had the contacts within and outside of Freemasonry that they needed, and he had the skill as a ritualist to build the projected Gradal structure, where they had ground to a halter. Illuminatus Minor, with only the Minerval grade below and the merest sketches of higher grades. The only restrictions imposed were the need to discuss the inner secrets of the highest grades, and the necessity of submitting his new grades for approval. Meanwhile, the scheme to propagate Illuminatism as a legitimate branch of Freemasonry had stalled. While Lodge Theodore was now in the control, a chapter of elect masters, attached to it only had one member from the order, and still had a constitutional superiority to the craft lodge controlled B. Why the Illuminati? The chapter would be difficult to persuade to submit to the Areopagus, and formed a very real barrier to Lodge Theodore becoming the first mother lodge of a new illuminated Freemasonry. A treaty of alliance was signed between the order and the chapter, and by the end of January 1781 4 daughter lodges had been created, but independence was not in the chapter's agenda. Costanza wrote to the Royal York pointing out the discrepancy between the fees dispatched to their new Grand Lodge and the service they had received in return. The Royal York, unwilling to lose the revenue, offered to confer the higher secrets of Freemasonry on a representative that their Munich brethren would dispatch to Berlin. Costanza accordingly set off for Prussia on the 4th of April 1780, with instructions to negotiate a reduction in Theodore's fees while he was there. On the way, he managed to have an argument with a Frenchman on the subject of a lady with whom they were sharing a carriage. The Frenchman sent a message ahead to the king, sometime before they reached Berlin, denouncing Costanza as a spy. He was only freed from prison with the help of the Grand Master of Royal York, and was expelled from Prussia having accomplished nothing. New system. Nig's initial plan to obtain a constitution from London would, they realized, have been seen through by the chapter. Until such time as they could take over other Masonic lodges that the chapter could not control, they were for the moment content to rewrite the 3 degrees for the lodges which they administered. On the 20th of January 1782 Nig tabulated his new system of grades for the order. These were arranged in 3 classes. Class 1, the nursery, consisting of the novitiate, the Minerval, and Illuminatus Minor. Class 2, the Masonic grades. The 3 Blue Lodge grades of Apprentice, Companion, and Master were separated from the higher, Scottish grades of Scottish Novice and Scottish Knight. Class 3, the Mysteries. The Lesser Mysteries were the grades of Priest and Prince, followed by the Greater Mysteries in the grades of Mage and King. It is unlikely that the rituals for the Greater Mysteries were ever written. Attempts at expansion. Nig's recruitment from German Freemasonry was far from random. He targeted the masters and wardens, the men who ran the lodges, and were often able to place the entire lodge at the disposal of the Illuminati. In Aachen, Baron de Witt, master of Constancy Lodge, caused every member to join the order. In this way, the order expanded rapidly in central and southern Germany, and obtained a foothold in Austria. Moving into the spring of 1782, the handful of students that had started the order had swelled to about 300 members, only 20 of the new recruits being students. In Munich, the first half of 1782 saw huge changes in the government of Lodge Theodore. In February, Weishaupt had offered to split the lodge, with the Illuminati going their own way and the chapter taking any remaining traditionalist side. NTO their own continuation of Theodore. At this point, the chapter unexpectedly capitulated, and the Illuminati had complete control of lodge and chapter. In June, both lodge and chapter sent letters severing relations with Royal York, citing their own faithfulness in paying for their recognition. N.D. Royal York's failure to provide any instruction into the higher grades. Their neglect of Costanza, failure to defend him from malicious charges or prevent his expulsion from Prussia, were also cited. They had made no effort to provide Costanza with the promised secrets, and the Munich Masons now suspected that the Brethren in Berlin relied on the mystical French higher grades which they sought to avoid. Lodge Theodore was now independent. The rite of strict observance was now in a critical state. Its nominal leader was Prince Karl of Sodermanland, later Charles XIII of Sweden, openly suspected of trying to absorb the rite into the Swedish Reich, which he already controlled. The German lodges looked for leadership to Duke Ferdinand of Brunswick-Wolfenbüttel. Suspicion turned to open contempt when it transpired that Karl regarded the Stuart heir to the British throne as the true Grand Master, and the lodges of the strict observance all but ignored the Grand Master. This impasse led to the convent of Wilhelmsbad. Delayed from the 15th of October 1781, the last convention of the strict observance finally opened on the 16th of July 1782 in the spa town of Wilhelmsbad on the outskirts of now part of Hanau. Ostensibly a discussion of the future of the order, the 35 delegates knew that the strict observance in its current form was doomed, and that the convent of Wilhelmsbad would be a struggle over the pieces between the German mystics, under Duke Ferdinand of Brunswick-Wolfenbüttel and their host Prince Charles of Hesse-Kassel, and the Martinists, under Jean-Baptiste Willemoes. The only dissenting voices to mystical higher grades were Johann Joachim Christoph Bode, who was horrified by Martinism, but whose proposed alternatives were as yet unformed, and Franz Dietrich von Dittfurth, a judge from Wet. ZLAR and master of the Joseph of the Three Helmets Lodge there, who was already a member of the Illuminati. Dittfurth publicly campaigned for a return to the basic 3 degrees of Freemasonry, which was the least likely outcome of the convention. The mystics already had coherent plans to replace the higher degrees. The lack of a coherent alternative to the 2 strains of mysticism allowed the Illuminati to present themselves as a credible option. Dittfurth, prompted and assisted by Nigg, who now had full authority to act for the order, became the spokesman. Nigg's original plan to propose an alliance between the 2 orders was rejected by Weishaupt, who saw no point in an alliance with a dying order. His new plan was to recruit the Masons opposed to the Templar, higher degree of the strict observance. At the convent, Dittfurth blocked the attempts of Willemoes and Hesse to introduce their own higher grades by insisting that full details of such degrees be revealed to the delegates. The frustration of the German mystics led to their enrolling Count Kolowrat with the Illuminati with a view to later affiliation. Dittfurth's own agenda was to replace all of the higher degrees with a single 4th degree, with no pretensions to further Masonic revelations. Finding no support for his plan, he left the convent prematurely, writing to the Areopagus that he expected nothing good of the assembly. In an attempt to satisfy everybody, the convent of Wilhelmsbad achieved little. They renounced the Templar origins of their ritual, while retaining the Templar titles, trappings and administrative structure. Charles of Hesse and Ferdinand of Brunswick remained at the head of the order, but in practice the lodges were almost independent. The Germans also adopted the name of the French Order of Willemoes, Les Chevaliers Bienfaisants de la Cité Sainte, Good Knights of the Holy City, and some Martinist mysticism was imported into the first 3 degrees, which were now the only essential degrees of Freemasonry. Crucially, individual lodges of the order were now allowed to fraternize with lodges of other systems. The new, Scottish grade, introduced with the Lyon ritual of Willemoes was not compulsory. Each province and prefecture was free to decide what, if anything, happened after the 3 craft degrees. Finally, in an effort to show that something had been achieved, the convent regulated at length on etiquette, titles, and a new numbering for the provinces. Aftermath of Wilhelmsbad. What the convent of Wilhelmsbad actually achieved was the demise of the strict observance. It renounced its own origin myth, along with the higher degrees which bound its highest and most influential members. It abolished the strict control which had kept the order united, and alienated many Germans who mistrusted Martinism. Bode, who was repelled by Martinism, immediately entered negotiations with Nig, and finally joined the Illuminati in January 1783. Charles of Hesse joined the following month. Nig's first efforts at an alliance with the intact German Grand Lodges failed, but Weishaupt persisted. He proposed a new federation where all of the German lodges would practice an agreed, unified system in the essential 3 degrees of Freemasonry, and be left to their own devices as to which, if any, system of higher degrees they wished to pursue. This would be a federation of Grand Lodges, and members would be free to visit any of the Blue Lodges in any jurisdiction. All lodge masters would be elected, and no fees would be paid to any central authority whatsoever. Groups of lodges would be subject to a Scottish directorate, composed of members delegated by lodges, to audit finances, settle disputes, and authorize new lodges. These in turn would elect provincial directorates, who would elect inspectors, who would elect the national director. This system would correct the current imbalance in German Freemasonry, where Masonic ideals of equality were preserved only in the lower 3 symbolic degrees. The various systems of higher degrees were dominated by the elite who could afford researchers in alchemy and mysticism. To Weishaupt and Nig, the proposed federation was also a vehicle to propagate Illuminism throughout German Freemasonry. Their intention was to use their new federation, with its emphasis on the fundamental degrees, to remove all allegiance to strict observance, allowing the eclectic system of the Illuminati to take its place. The circular announcing the new federation outlined the faults of German Freemasonry, that unsuitable men with money were often admitted on the basis of their wealth, that the corruption of civil society had infected the lodges. Having advocated the deregulation of the higher grades of the German lodges, the Illuminati now announced their own, from their unknown superiors. Lodge Theodore, newly independent from Royal York, set themselves up as a provincial Grand Lodge. Nig, in a letter to all the Royal York lodges, now accused the Grand Lodge of decadence. Their Freemasonry had allegedly been corrupted by the Jesuits. Strict observance was now attacked as a creation of the Stuarts, devoid of all moral virtue. The Zinzendorf Rite of the Grand Land Lodge of the Freemasons of Germany was suspect because its author was in league with the Swedes. This direct attack had the opposite effect to that intended by Weishaupt. It offended many of its readers. The Grand Lodge of the Grand Orient of Warsaw, which controlled Freemasonry in Poland and Lithuania, was happy to participate in the federation only as far as the first 3 degrees. Their insistence on independence had kept them from the strict observance, and would now keep them from the Illuminati, whose plan to annex Freemasonry rested on their own higher degrees. By the end of January 1783, the Illuminati's Masonic contingent had 7 lodges. The final decline of the Illuminati was brought about by the indiscretions of their own Minervals in Bavaria, and especially in Munich. In spite of efforts by the superiors to curb loose talk, politically dangerous boasts of power and criticism of monarchy caused the secret order's existence to become common knowledge, along with the names of many important members. The presence of Illuminati in positions of power now led to some public disquiet. There were Illuminati in many civic and state governing bodies. In spite of the small number, there were claims that success in a legal dispute depended on the litigant's standing with the order. The Illuminati were blamed for several anti-religious publications then appearing in Bavaria. Much of this criticism sprang from vindictiveness and jealousy, but it is clear that many Illuminati court officials gave preferential treatment to the Brethren. In Bavaria, the energy of the 2 members of the ecclesiastical council had one of them elected treasurer. Their opposition to Jesuits resulted in the banned order losing key academic and church positions. In Ingolstadt, the Jesuit heads of department were replaced by Illuminati. Alarmed, Charles Theodore and his government banned all secret societies including the Illuminati. A government edict dated the 2nd of March 1785 seems to have been death blow to the Illuminati in Bavaria. Weishaupt had fled, and documents and internal correspondence, seized in 1786 and 1787, were subsequently published by the government in 1787. Von Zwack's home was searched and much of the group's literature was disclosed.
The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has chosen me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to set at liberty those who are oppressed, and announce that the time has come when the Lord will save his people.
Yes, he speaks well.
This passage of Scripture has come true today, as you heard it being read.
The scripture come true?
But only the Messiah can fulfill that promise.
How shall we know?